This is a summary of an excerpt from Emile Durkheim's book Suicide, a study in sociology. The excerpt is called Suicide and Modernity and was published in 1897. Durkheim begins this piece by saying that no animal or human can be happy or exist if there are not enough resources to fulfill their needs. If someone is living under conditions where their needs exceed the resources needed, then they will live a painful life. For animals, all they need are basic things like food and water. Durkheim says that animals lack the imagination that would create new needs beyond their physical needs. Durkheim says that unlike all other animals, a majority of human needs are not physical. They go beyond just food and water. Unlike animals, humans have imaginations that can create new desires. Since our imaginations are so powerful, what we desire seems to never end. History has seen the constant development of new and more needs, says Durkheim, and what is interesting is that fulfillment doesn't seem to be found in any social class. Whatever social class one is in, there are always more and different desires. Durkheim says that our desires are not determined by our human nature. If they were, we would all desire the same thing. For Durkheim, our desires are mental, and since we can desire anything we imagine, we risk being in a state where we are never fulfilled. In order to avoid the state of agony that would result from desiring something extreme, our desires need to be limited. Only then can they be harmonized with what we can achieve. So how could a human's imagination be limited? Durkheim says it happens by an external force. This external force is morality. Just how natural resources fulfill our physical needs, morals set limits on what we desire, and as a result allow us to satisfy the limited desires we have. Durkheim says that restraint of our desires cannot be physical, because physical restraint would be ineffective. Hearts cannot be touched by physiochemical forces. This means our desires can be limited only by what we believe is just. Durkheim also believes that the idea of justice won't be created by humans on their own, but need to be taught by an authority figure that they respect. For Durkheim, society can play this role because it is the only moral power superior to the individual that he accepts as authority. Durkheim goes on to say that in every society, at every point in history, there is a weak perception by its members of society of how valuable different social services are. He also states that their value changes over time, and things are valued differently across social classes. Since our desires vary across time and class, Durkheim says, that Since our desires vary across time and class, Durkheim says that society is able to set limits on our desires and allow us to obtain happiness. These limitations vary across time and culture, but for Durkheim, it also requires members of society to believe that what they are giving up is in the interests of society. Durkheim says that while some economists say getting rid of systems where people are privileged based on which family they were born into would get rid of this moral justification, Durkheim says no, we would still need to justify that some people get more, or else people would not accept the inequality. He goes on to say that throughout history, when people no longer feel an inequality was justified, they revolt. For Durkheim, what makes man unique isn't that the bond he accepts is not physical but moral, that he is social. He is governed not by a material environment brutally imposed on him, but by a conscience superior to his own. For Durkheim, whenever there is a moment where there is a crisis, the set of morals that limit our desires is disrupted, which he believes causes an increase in suicide. For Durkheim, when a crisis like an economic catastrophe occurs, old morals are no longer seen as just, and people begin to desire more and more. As a result, the available resources are not able to fulfill their desires, and people experience mental pain from not being satisfied. Durkheim goes on to say that we rarely see suicide in poverty-stricken areas because those who are poor desire very little and have very little to be disappointed about. But the rich desire so much that when they can't have things, they have a lot to be disappointed from. Durkheim goes on to say that if anomie, the condition in which society provides little moral guidance to individuals, only occurred during crises, we'd expect to see suicide only during those periods. But Durkheim says that since we no longer live in a society where social class is believed to be due to some divine blueprint, we are living in a world where social class is something that someone can change over their lifetime, and because of this, people's desires are not limited and they are at risk of falling below the social class they were born into. For Durkheim, the current economic system of market capitalism does not put limits on our desires and therefore increases the chances that we will desire too much, which will cause us to commit suicide. Durkheim says, if moral limitations have been unregulated, how can we ever go back to a society where desire isn't unlimited and the mental pain and risk for suicide isn't so problematic? For Durkheim, we are living in a society where society provides little moral guidance to individuals. We live in a society where we always want more and have more opportunities to feel the pain of disappointment. Here's a quote from Durkheim. Quote, "The whole fever subsides and the sterility of all the tumult is apparent, and it is seen that all these new sensations in their infinite quantity cannot form a solid foundation of happiness to support one during days of trial." End quote. Durkheim says that today we believe it is normal to always desire something new without rest. He even says that in our society it is moral to have infinite desires. Durkheim says that since this attitude is most prevalent in the economic world, that is where we see the most suicides. According to the statistics he had at the time, a higher percent of those who lived in most comfortably committed suicide more often. In conclusion, Durkheim states that when there is a very weak system of morals limiting our desires, suicide increases, and that this is one of 3 types of suicide that he explains in his book. Durkheim calls this type of suicide anomic suicide. The other 2 types of suicide are called egoistic suicide and altruistic suicide.